Hi, Tony.
Hi, good morning. How you doing?
We're good, we're good. Good morning.
Good to see you.
Hi, everyone who's joining us here today. Please, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time zone you're in. We will be starting in exactly 5 minutes. If there's anybody else you know who'd be interested in this panel discussion, quickly, please get them online, get them to join us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what. We have 58 people, 59 people who've joined us already. Um, in case you are not currently speaking, we request you to put yourselves on mute since there can sometimes be background sounds that might interrupt our speakers. And of course, if you are sharing or speaking, feel free to unmute yourselves. We'll be starting in another 2 minutes. Hi, Sandy.
Now say hi.
Hello.
Sanvi, we missed you for class today.
I was sleeping for whole time.
I know.
I can't able to wake up. Rather.
So we're ready to start. So welcome everybody to our panel discussion on screen time and behavior, how to navigate through the new normal. So today we have with us Kelly Dorfman. Kelly, could you unmute yourself and say hello to our audience?
Hello, everybody.
We have Lindsay Bale. Lindsay, could you say hello to everybody?
Hi, everyone.
And we have Dr. Fran Reinstein. Dr. Fran, could you unmute yourself and say hello to everyone?
Hi, everybody.
So we're very, very privileged to have these experts as part of our Gateway family. In today's panel discussion, our panelists will bring to you a perspective on how sensory difficulties, visual-related problems, and nutrition can shape what you see as behavior difficulties in children. They will also talk about some practical solutions to help your child cope with screen time during this global pandemic. So to begin with, I would like to take a few minutes to share a little bit about our school. Manika, could you just share screen and share the Gateway presentation? So the Gateway School of Mumbai is a non-for-profit organization dedicated to empowering children with learning difficulties. We are in our 9th academic year. The vision and mission of Gateway is to empower our students to become independent, productive, and contributing members of society. We are also a lab school where we're generating knowledge, bringing down best practices in the field of education, and adapting it to our population. We follow a holistic approach to education where not only we focus on academic learning, but also the social emotional well-being of our students and parents. As part of our outreach initiative, we bring to you these insightful webinars in an attempt to generate and share learning. So today, as we speak about behaviors from the sensory, vision, and nutrition lens, at Gateway, we also have a very similar approach in how we support a child's learning. Our programs are designed not only to support academic learning, but also to develop foundational skills for our children. Essentially, we look at 3 foundational areas, which are sensory motor development, socio-emotional development, and speech and language development. At Gateway, the child is at the center. So therapists, educators, and parents work in close collaboration to find a balance to best support a student's learning. Therapies are provided in a group setting or a pull-out structure or a push-in structure, depending on what the child needs. Now, the push-in model at Gateway is unique to Gateway. We believe that therapeutic skills are to support participation and help children learn. So while they are explicitly worked on in, say, traditional therapeutic practices, at Gateway, our approach is to eventually help children generalize these skills in the classroom and the outside community. So essentially, there is a lot of focus on building and supporting foundational areas through a collaborative approach. So with that, let's begin with our panel discussion that everybody is here for. How it's going to be like, each of our panelists are going to speak for a duration of 30 minutes. During the discussion, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can put the questions down on the chat. Radhika Chandrasekharan, she's going to be taking your questions and bringing it to our panelists at the end of the session. And also, we request you to put down the name of the panelist against your question, so then we know whom the question is directed to. We will also be sharing a recording of this session on our YouTube channel. So with that, we're ready to begin. Can I request everyone, if you haven't muted yourself, please mute yourself so that you can hear the speakers clearly. And with that, let me introduce you to our first panelist, Dr. Fran Reinstein. So we had the opportunity to having a close association with her for almost 2 decades. Dr. Reinstein has played a vital role in helping our founder, Indira Kudani, understand and support her son, Yuvraj, who was struggling with visuoperceptual difficulties. So a little bit about Dr. Reinstein. Dr. Reinstein has been practicing optometry since her graduation from the State University of New York, State College of Optometry in the year 1991. Upon graduation, she received an Award of Excellence in Pediatrics and Award for Skill and Proficiency in Contact Lens Fitting. Dr. Reinstein completed a residency in Pediatrics and Binocular Vision at the Pennsylvania College of Optometry, where she served on the faculty of the Pediatrics and Binocular Vision modules. As an assistant professor of the SUNY State College of Optometry, she was a clinical supervisor in the Pediatrics Department. Dr. Reinstein served as a trustee of the New York State Optometric Association. She also served as president of the Optometric Society of the City of New York for 10 years. Dr. Reinstein has lectured extensively on infant and pediatric vision, and she is also on the Gateway Advisory Board. So with that, over to you, Dr. Reinstein.
Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm going to share my screen. Oh, hold on. I can't share yet. You guys may have to share the
Dr.
presentation.
Reinstein, give me 1 second, which is
Okay, no problem.
you should be
Okay.
able to share now.
All right. No, I'm not. Okay, share. Ugh. Give me 1 second, guys, because now it's not working. There we go. I'm just trying to get it into, there we go. Do you guys see it?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Okay, just checking. Okay, everybody. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how vision affects learning, and also during our new normal, how children, after sitting in front of computer screens all day, how vision affects behavior and how that would affect in turn learning. So the first thing we're going to talk about is eye exams. When should children get eye exams? How often do children get eye exams? A very small % of children actually receive a comprehensive eye exam prior to entering first grade, which is obviously a huge grade of learning. That's a little bit on the contradictory side, because when you're talking about learning, so much learning is taking place through the visual system. 80% actually of learning takes place through the visual system. So if kids aren't receiving eye exams before they enter school, then that can certainly be a problem, because we don't even understand how they're seeing and how they're using their sight. Out of the 20% of children who have a learning disability, believe it or not, 70% of those children have some type of visual problem. It doesn't mean that they can't see. It could mean that something else is going on with their vision, which we'll cover in a little bit. So if you think about a population like Gateway, those children certainly, as part of their admission to the school and as part of their schooling, need to have their eyes examined to make sure that they're receiving the proper information through their visual system and they're focusing and concentrating well. I am part of the American Optometric Association, and the recommendations for children's eye exams, believe it or not, I start seeing children at 6 months old to a year. That's when the first exam should take place, to make sure that the child has 2 eyes that are functioning well, that they're receiving information through their vision, that they have no eye disease, that they don't have a history of a lazy eye, or they don't have a lazy eye. If everything is normal during that exam, then we usually like to see a child at 3 years old after language develops, and then again at 5 years of age before they get into school, and then every year after that while they're in school. And then as we become adults, we want to see people also, obviously. Now, why should this happen? Why do children need eye exams? Children are young, they're healthy, it looks like their eyes are working together, they see the little birds in the sky, they can certainly read up close better than a lot of us can, but vision is very active and a dynamic process, and it changes as the visual demands change. So a kindergartner uses their vision very differently than a 4th grader or a 3rd grader. In kindergarten, children are learning how to read. In 1st grade, children are learning how to read. By the time you read 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, you're not only learning how to read, but you need to learn. As you go on in school, obviously the demands change, especially now we're putting computers on kindergartners' desks in school, and we're asking preschoolers to sit and use tablets and use computers at home to even Zoom learn. So these visual demands are very difficult, and it's important that the child has the correct vision in order to accommodate for this. Now let's talk a little bit about the effects of screen time with vision during our new normal. So the most likely effect of screen time would be eye strain. You know, you sit in front of a computer all day long, and focusing on the computer is definitely going to cause some discomfort, some eye strain. Also, the behavioral changes associated with excessive computer use. We're talking about blue light coming off of a computer screen, the absorption of blue light, the fact that blue light can't necessarily or changes the circadian rhythm of the brain. Kids aren't sleeping as well if they're using computers late into the night or even early into the night. You're talking about an increase in nearsightedness from focusing up close. Our eyes are not meant to focus up close all day. We were built as hunters and gatherers, and we were meant to look far away. So now we're asking people or children to accommodate to a screen that's within 18 to 24 inches of their visual system. This is really causing muscular strain for kids and can actually increase the effects of nearsightedness if children or adults are not resting their eyes sufficiently. ADHD. How can a computer cause ADHD or computer eye strain? Well, children who aren't corrected properly and their vision isn't corrected properly can show signs and symptoms of ADHD, and they may not even have ADHD. They may just have computer eye strain. They may need a pair of glasses. So a lot of times I'll examine kids and the parents will come in and say, you know, my child has attention deficit, and we give them a pair of glasses and all those signs and symptoms actually do subside a little bit or go away. So is the ADHD real? Is it not real? What is it caused by? I know that Lindsay and Kelly are going to get into this also, because there are a lot of different causes of ADHD that can be resolved with little simple things like a pair of glasses and other things that we're going to talk about later. How can we control the effects of excessive screen time? My mantra every single day, especially now, is the 20-20-20 rule. What does that mean? That means that every 20 minutes, we want to take a 20-second rest break and look at least 20 feet away. Your eyes have muscles just like the rest of your body. If you went to the gym and held 5-pound weights for 6 hours, you would have very much difficulty putting down your arms and releasing your bicep. Well, your eyes have muscles just like the rest of your body has. You need to relax the muscles throughout the day. And if you think of your eyes having muscles and think of relaxing that muscle, it'll be very easy to follow this rule. As a matter of fact, I have my patients set their timer on their cell phone every 20 minutes, just to give a little tiny ding, have them close their eyes, take a deep breath, look out a window, down a hallway, and come back and do their work. After about a week's time, if you really do this religiously, your brain will get used to doing this, and you won't have to actually set a timer, and your body will just get used to the timing of that every 20 minutes. It's very, very important to do that, and I've had people tell me that it's life-altering. Good lighting is very, very important when you're talking about screen time. Make sure that you don't have very, very strong lighting in the room. You want moderate lighting. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit in the other lectures also. You want to make sure that you don't have, everybody thinks you need excessive lighting. You want to stay away from open windows and light behind the screen or in front of the screen. Good posture. You want to make sure that your children aren't zooming in bed or zooming laying on the floor. You want them to be sitting at a desk. You want it to simulate school as much as possible. The children wouldn't necessarily be laying on the floor or laying down on a table or laying in bed, obviously, when they're in school. So you want this Zoom schooling to simulate regular school as much as possible. Blue light filters, you know, everybody's heard about that. You can get a blue light filter for the front of your screen. You can have a blue light filter put on glasses. You can, some computers actually even have blue light filters now. So all of those points are very important for use when you're talking about excessive screen time. Signs of vision problems. These are signs that parents, teachers, OTs can certainly look for when they're working with kids. Avoid schoolwork and reading, loss of place when reading, frequently rubbing eyes. Even kids who rub their eyes frequently develop styes, and parents ask me why they have styes so often. The print blurs in and out of focus if your child actually tells you that. A child who sits and covers one eye or turns a head when reading. A child who takes too long to complete homework, or actually takes longer to complete homework at the end of the day and reads faster at the beginning of the day. Headaches and eye pain, poor hand-eye coordination, which would include handwriting, sports. Those are all really important to take a look at when you're dealing with signs of vision issues. What is the difference between vision and sight? There's a difference between how you see and how you function. Vision is actually a learned skill. You're not born with vision. You're born with sight, which is limited at birth, but you're not born with vision. You have to develop vision, and it's very much a learned process, just like learning how to swallow and learning how to eat certain foods. Vision is something you have to learn and develops over time. So this is just a quick screen about sight and how sight enhances vision. So it is important to have good sight, obviously, if you want to have good vision. You don't need 20/20 vision necessarily to have good sight, but you want to have good sight to actually develop or enhance vision. So what takes place with vision? Focusing, eye teaming, tracking. You have to have good sight also to actually have visual processing. So in order to have good processing, you need to have good focusing, eye teaming, and tracking to potentially have good visual processing. But some of those things we also have to work with. Now, when we do an eye exam, the first thing we check is input, which is vision. We want to make sure that somebody can see well out of their right eye, out of their left eye, and then we want to check to see how they're integrating both eyes together as a team and how their tracking is. After that, we can focus on processing and how vision is interpreted through the visual system. Sight problems can include nearsightedness, myopia, blurred vision in the distance. We've had a significant increase of this in the last 40 years because of things like computers, because of things like cell phones, because children are focusing so much on doing close work and not getting out enough and using their distance vision. Farsightedness is very tricky because yes, it can cause poor focusing at near and at distance, but with children, they have pretty strong focusing systems and can actually cover up farsightedness. And that's the thing that I find, that kids who are diagnosed with ADHD sometimes are farsighted, and we give them a pair of glasses, and the signs of the ADHD significantly decrease if they have a significant amount of farsightedness. But those children can actually see pretty well. So it's tricky to actually diagnose those patients without a good eye exam, a thorough eye exam. Astigmatism is the way the eye is shaped. It can cause distortion at distance and near, and you can see little samples of what visual distortion would look like. Again, a little bit tricky because a large amount of astigmatism causes significant distortion, but a small amount of astigmatism, which can cause an input problem, may not be noticed quite as easily. So what would you see with a child who has a vision issue? You may see that they're getting too close to their page. Pretty obvious. Even though this child seems to be wearing glasses on top, it doesn't mean that he's actually focusing or tracking well. the page can be a significant indication. Poor posture, a child lays down on their arm, covers an eye. I see this all the time that I'm testing kids and they have one eye covered or their head is turned. So I ask them if they see double and they say no because they accommodate for it by just closing an eye. Obviously, if a child is sitting and closing both eyes and just shows significant strain, that would be something more obvious. But a lot of parents don't even notice that a child is closing an eye. Eye teaming. So this is hard to read, correct? So if your child is actually seeing double, they may not even notice that they have double vision because they're used to seeing like this. They were born not seeing double, of course, but as they're developing in school, their eyes tend to see double and they might not even complain of double vision because to them, that's their normal. When they read, they see double. I worked with a child when I was a resident, and after a few sessions of eye exercises and vision therapy, he came out actually crying, and it was upsetting to him. And this was a very, very, very bright child. He thought double was his normal. Obviously, it's very difficult to read with double vision and gets exhausting. Focusing issues. If a child has focusing one eye or both eyes together, again, for anybody who wears reading glasses up close, if you take your reading glasses off and you try and focus all day, it can cause significant eye strain. Focusing is a one eye type of issue. Both eyes want to work together as a team. So if one eye is having problems focusing, trying to focus with the other eye can also be very, very, very difficult. Tracking problems. Tracking problems can appear that the child is moving their head back and forth instead of keeping their head nice and straight when they're actually doing schoolwork. They're losing their place when they read. They're even inverting words, leaving out small words, skipping lines, difficulty catching a ball, throwing a ball, or reading comprehension because it takes so much effort to stay on the page and on the print. And if a child is reading to themselves, sometimes it's hard to even notice that, except that when they get to the end of the paragraph, they don't even understand what they read because they've missed so much along the way. Reading is a very complex process, and it can, and again, you need good vision, good tracking, good focusing, and good eye teaming skills, along with visual perception. Visual information processing is how the brain actually interprets the information that we're processing through our visual system. So obviously, everything else has to work in place before we can even deal with visual processing. So the importance of good eyesight and good eye teaming allows our system to process information. Visual information processing can be visual memory, visual motor, visual form, how we recognize of the pictures, visual teaming, in other words, visual construction. You want to make sure that all of this takes place and all of this is part of learning and interpretation. How can we help? Well, the easiest way to help is to get those comprehensive eye exams and to actually be aware of how a child is focusing during the day and how a child is focusing toward the end of the day. So part of this we leave to our teachers, who need good information and good training on how to notice if a child is having issues with their eyes and with their vision. The detection of visual issues can sometimes be corrected with glasses. Even a small prescription can sometimes help these children. So even a tiny reading prescription that you would think is nothing can help these children focus more appropriately. Sometimes even with the glasses, with a small reading or say computer prescription, we can put an anti-reflective coating on the glasses and a blue light filter on the glasses to help with eye strain. It's very important that you go to a doctor who is willing to look at all of these areas as well. Detection of visual issues can be treated, obviously, with glasses, or sometimes this can be treated, a lot of times focusing and double vision can't just be treated with glasses. It needs more treatment with something like optometric vision therapy or occupational therapy. I know that vision therapy is very limited in India, but the occupational therapists are well trained in how to treat eye tracking and some focusing issues. Our goal is to work with the occupational therapist where vision therapy is not something that is common, to actually help them to treat these kids. The problem is that we need to detect these eye issues. So part of the issue is going to be detection. Part of it is going to be leaving it up to the parents, leaving it up to the schools, leaving it up to the eye doctors to actually help with this visual detection. And then we have to figure out how to help these kids. Comprehensive eye exams. Always ensure your child has the best possible vision for the critical years. So as a back to school checklist, which is kind of funny now because the kids are actually homeschooling. So you want to make sure they have nice bright pajamas, or obviously their school uniforms, their school supplies, which have been mainly their computers, school physicals, school haircuts, which isn't really happening as much right now. But you want to make sure that your children get comprehensive eye exams every year. Physicals. The pediatrician doesn't give a comprehensive eye exam. They do check vision. And like we talked about, vision is very, very important. But you also need a comprehensive eye exam in order to make sure that not only the vision is being addressed, but how the kids are using their vision. And that isn't only for children, it's for adults too. Good resources to look at are AOA.org and COVD.org. Both of these organizations have resources to help and articles to help so that you can actually address some of these issues. Both of these organizations have vision care resources. CLVD is actually an international organization as well. And that completes my series today.
Thank you, Dr. Reinstein. Could you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Share. Hold on. How do I stop sharing? Oh, here we go. Sorry. There we go.
So, Dr. Reinstein, that was a wonderful takeaway for all of us. I think so many things that you brought to our notice: importance of early detection, how the early years are so critical for a child's learning, and vision is something that we actually back here often miss out on. So, early detection is so critical. The impact on blue light on sleep, that is something we all are going through. I know I am not getting enough sleep because of the amount of blue light we're exposed to. So watching out for that. And thank you for sharing so many practical, very easy to apply tips that we can directly take back into our classrooms. So thank you so much for sharing that. So with that, we have our next panelist, Lindsay Bale. So Lindsay Bale is a very experienced occupational therapist. I personally have read her books and various articles during my own professional growth and practice. And she has been an inspiration for many budding occupational and physical therapists in India as well. A little bit about Lindsay Bale. She's a pediatric occupational therapist with a private practice in New York City, where she evaluates and treats children, adolescents, and young adults with sensory processing issues, developmental delays, autism spectrum disorder, and other challenges. Lindsay is a co-author of the award-winning Raising a Sensory Smart Child, which is a handbook for helping children with sensory processing issues, with a foreword by Temple Grandin, and author of Sensory Processing Challenges, Effective Clinical Work with Kids and Teens. We're also privileged to have her now on our advisory board. So please join me in welcoming Lindsay. Lindsay, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so these are my books. All right, so today we're going to talk about sensory processing and screen time. But before I go into specifics, I have some specific strategies that you can use to help your children or the children that you work with. I want to just make sure we're all on the same page regarding sensory processing, what it is, what it's all about. We first learn through the world about the world through our senses. Right, the child sees things, hears things, moves through space, challenges the limit of his or her own body. And sensory processing is the neurological process of taking all those little bits of sensory input and transforming it into meaningful messages so the child knows what to do and how to respond accordingly. Now, this is something that usually occurs automatically without thinking, without effort, but because of how some people's nervous systems are wired, meaning their brains and their bodies, some people take in and use sensory information in a different way. So this can range from kind of the little quirks that we all have. I don't like tags in my clothing. I don't like wool against my skin. You know, these are just preferences and intolerances. It can range from that all the way to really a very severe dysfunction that we see most often in autism and other conditions. So some common signs are out of proportion reactions to different sensory experiences like touch and sound and visuals and even movement, body awareness, smells and tastes. So a child may be sensitive to clothing and food textures, or very distressed by a very light touch on the skin or unexpected touch. They may be distracted or upset by different kinds of visuals, like fluorescent lighting. Can be very upsetting for someone who's visually very sensitive. Certain sounds, not just the volume, but also the frequency, high versus low frequency. A lot of times we'll see that the person with sensory differences has a very high or low activity level. They may be an extremely picky eater, eating just a few foods, and easily overstimulated in particularly in busy environments. We often see a lot of fine and gross motor difficulties, as well as low muscle tone and body awareness challenges. So there are a lot of these motor movement kinds of difficulties. We also see quite often a lot of decreased attention and difficulty with focus, where the person frequently tunes out or acts out. Now we know that this can be due to visual problems. If you can't see well and you can't use what you see well, you're not going to be paying attention and focusing well on the task at hand. So we're going to really narrow in on screen time during our short time together. We're going to talk about the importance of managing to be successful with screen time, with learning remotely on Zoom or whatever platform. You need to manage sensory needs. The person needs to be able to sit still and focus for long periods. The person needs physical stability and security. They need to see well, they need to eat well, and they need to sleep well. So there's a lot going on. We're going to zero in on the sensory piece. Children, teens, and adults with sensory issues are functioning to their very best. And believe me, they're always trying their very best. They're not lazy, you know, unintelligent or not trying. But we know that they thrive because the world is such a chaotic place, because the sensory input is not organized and they don't feel that sense of stability and security. They really, really thrive on routine and predictability more than anyone else does. So we all do, but kids really need to stick to a routine, especially if they have sensory difficulties. So you're going to have them get up the same time each morning, get dressed, eat, and go to remote school. So they're not transitioning. Normally, kids get a lot of sensory input when they physically travel to school. So we need to create that at home because they need that sensory input before school. They can't roll out of bed and plop in front of the computer and do well. We can't expect that. It will help to create some routine and predictability, to create a written or a visual photo, sequence photo plan for the day so they know what to expect, and be sure to give them some choices. You want to set aside a dedicated learning area in your home. I know this is not easy, especially if you have a busy, full household. So set aside a special area in your home if possible. Reduce clutter as much as possible to provide a clear, clean workspace. This photo here is a very beautiful pussycat on the kitchen counter where a client of mine does her work. And, it's a wonderful, loving, vibrant household, but it was impossible for this child to focus on her work. So we really, unfortunately, the kitty had to go away because I constantly wanted to pet it. Not to mention the child, but really clearing off that space and making it easier, enabling, empowering the child to focus. So get rid of the visual as well as the noise distractions as much as possible. So I'm going to go over some quick sensory hacks. I don't know if you're using that term where you are, but they're just kind of like quick fixes to make things work better. So consider a privacy partition in a busy room. What's shown in the photo is just cardboard cut out so that there's a visual shield, so that the child's not seeing what's going on in a different part of the room, and they can begin to focus in on what they're doing and not be looking around quite as much. If you can't get rid of the clutter, all the stuff that's around in your home, if possible, just tack up a sheet that obscures all of the stuff that your child is looking around at all the time. If you put up a sheet, it's not going to be very visually interesting. When possible, use headphones to block out noise so the child can listen better. So if they're on computer, have them listening with headphones, and that way it's easier for them to tune into what is being said. Be sure to organize the materials beforehand. Lots of sharp pencils, grips, scissors, tape, all of that good stuff. And make sure the eyeglasses, if the child is wearing them, are actually clean. I work very closely with Dr. Reinstein in New York City. And a lot of the children that I see have been given these wonderful eyeglasses that are so great for them. And then I go for my session, I pick up the eyeglasses, and they're filthy. So full of fingerprints, because children aren't careful about how they remove their eyeglasses. So we always make sure that their eyeglasses are clean, and I'll teach a child how to do that if possible. And make sure the tech is charged and working before you leave the area. To help the child feel kind of centered and calm, you can try diffusing an essential oil, such as a lot of it depends on what your child enjoys, but generally mint, like a peppermint, or a citrus like sweet orange oil, tend to alert a child who tends to be a little bit sluggish and under aroused. For kids who tend to be hyped up, flower essences tend to calm, like a rose, something like that, champaka, this kind of thing can be very calming for a child. So we're going to position the child to learn. Plopping a child onto an adult-sized chair when they're a small child and have to reach up to get up to that computer, they're going to start sliding around and moving. It's going to be very hard for them to sit for long periods. We know that children's bodies aren't built to sit for a long, long time. At the very least, we can give them some support. What you're going to be looking for are those right angles at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. The child's feet should be able to rest on the floor. Although we know kids are going to be moving around, but they should be able to give themselves that stability if possible. If they cannot rest their feet on the floor, they can be given a footrest, you know, a step stool. Sometimes I can find them in the bathroom for a child to get up to the sink to brush their teeth and wash their faces. You can use a box, anything, figure out what height of a box or footrest will get that 90-degree angle that you're looking for. You can also add a bouncy band around the front chair legs. And by that I mean like a thick rubber band, very thick rubber band around the front chair legs. The pelvis, the hip should be in neutral so the spine can elongate. You're probably starting to sink into gravity right now. Notice if you're slouching a little bit and then straighten up. That's what you want for your child. A lot of our kids can't do that. So we add an inflatable wedge-shaped cushion. Shown here in the photo is the Move and Sit Junior that you can get online, moderately inflated. That biomechanically tilts the pelvis forward. Very important. And we talked about having, you know, not hiking up the shoulders or slumping. You need an appropriate size table. Right now, to look at my screen, I'm up on 3 jigsaw puzzle boxes so that my screen is at eye level. Think about the lighting. Avoid overhead lighting that reflects off surfaces, right? Our tabletops tend to be shiny. If you have light that's pointing down, it's going to shine up and into the child's eyes. You can add some pieces of non-shiny matte paper to the table if that's the only light source you have. Remember that sensitive kids can see and hear fluorescent lights as they flicker on and off. So you want to try to use warm LED bulbs. Old-fashioned incandescent bulbs, if you can find them, are actually really very visually sensory friendly. Halogen bulbs are also pretty good, and you want them at eye level. So a table lamp, a floor lamp, rather than the overhead lights, diffused natural light, you know, not bright sunshine that's aimed right at the computer, but just diffused natural light is lovely. So Fran brought up the blue light filters, and you can try certainly the blue light filters. There are also colored filters that are built into I think every computer and tablet and even smartphone at this point. And I've given you the directions for how to find those within your tech operating system. So you have that. I want to show you the difference. You've been watching a screen with text on a white background for a while now. Watch what happens, how you feel in your body and in your eyes when I do this. It changes the experience, right? And for some people, that can really make it more sensory, visually friendly. Try this one. I find this one quite relaxing. And I'll play with this a lot when I do workshops, and I always take a poll. And some people hate any color. Some people love the yellow. I'll do orange. It's so idiosyncratic. One of the reasons why I love adding a colored filter is that some kids with visual sensory issues, they have a contrast sensitivity. It's very hard for them to tolerate that black type against a white background. The letters start to jiggle and wiggle. And just adding a little color can help to relax the eyes. Okay. Now, I mentioned earlier that our bodies are not meant to sit. We're not supposed to sit for hours and hours and hours each day. And children especially need movement breaks that reset the eyes, the brains, and the bodies. So there's a lot of ways to incorporate this into remote learning. You need to plan on movement breaks. I would say, depending on the child and the child's age, every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, at the very least every hour. And that's true for you too. So animal walks are a wonderful way to do this. And it's nice to have a visual, but it's great. You know, you can print out cards that show things like the snake slithering and imitating that. Of course, it's going to be most fun if you get up and you do it with your child or your children, where everyone's doing the snake, or you could have it where someone's doing a movement that's an animal walk and everyone has to guess and imitate, that kind of thing. A good movement that we can do right now, because we've been sitting, is shoulder shrugs. Right? Go ahead and try that just to loosen that stuff up, right? We all walk around like this all day with our phones, and we need to let go, right? Some arm circles. You can have your child dip paintbrushes into invisible paint and paint big circles. Go ahead and try it. It feels really good. Big, huge circles against the wall, like 10 times, and then change direction. And what are we doing here? We're just sort of bringing all this stuff out and open because we all tighten up here. And then we start breathing in a very shallow way. Our children, because they're on Zoom so much, they're not using their hands as much. So there's lots of different ways we can strengthen hands. One of my favorite ways to do this during a quick reset: shoulder shrugs, arm circles, and then karate hands. And you're going to go like this, and this looks funny on the computer because now my hands look huge. But anyway, you're going to make a fist and extend your fingers 10 times. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Palms up, and do it again. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right? Your hands might even hurt right now, because we're just not using our hands. There's something called GoNoodle.com. It's very popular here in the United States. Check it out. It's a free website with the most wonderful activities, arousing activities, mindfulness, meditation activities, dance, dance things. So it's so much fun, and kids love GoNoodle. So that's something you can incorporate into a quick movement break. And then we have Brain Gym, which is a series of exercises that gets the two hemispheres of your body, of your brain, talking to each other. Very important. We're not going to we don't have time to do it today, but you can look up Brain Gym. Yoga poses are just wonderful for resetting the brain and the body. Some favorites: the child's pose on the top left, the cobra pose top right, cat-cow pose, those alternating flexion extension exercises on the bottom left, and of course downward dog on the bottom right. So yoga poses are wonderful, and they get kids breathing and moving. So here's something I created that you're welcome to use, and you can easily adapt and create your own, right? So it's called What's Your Name? And I individualize it for various children that I work with. Let's say the child's name is Arjun. So 10 jumping jacks, and then the child, finds the R, and I may have to help them 10-second running in place, and then J, 5-second plank. And you're going to need to teach a child how to do these things. And U, 8 steps on your heels, so heel walking, and finally N, 5 jump ups. And these are so much fun. And I always have kids want to spell all of their friends' names and their siblings' names, and it really gets them moving. It's a nice quick reset. And I'm happy to share that with anybody who would like this, but you can create your own quite easily. Balloon tennis is one of my favorite games to play with kids. If you have any balloon, it's wonderful. But I really love punch balloons that are thicker, heavier, and last a longer time and are less at risk for breakage, and just really smashing it back and forth with any lightweight racket. If you don't have tennis rackets and you only have some cheap balloons that aren't very heavy, take the balloon, you can fill it up with a little bit of uncooked dry rice. So it's got a little bit more weight, and you can just play balloon volleyball. It's great for that tracking, moving, anticipating trajectories. If your child isn't really tracking things as they move through space well, you can attach a rope or a string and hang it from the ceiling, from some, a hook on the ceiling or something like that. And then they can practice swatting at it, and eventually perhaps with a racket, that kind of thing. Another game that kids really enjoy is what I call toy toss. And again, we're with the balloon, and I'll have them pick out, let's say 10 little stuffed toys. And, when I'm doing things, I'm also trying to get them to learn their alphabet and learn how to count and all these things, one-to-one correspondence. So I'm embedding all of these different educational lessons into these little exercise movement breaks. So the toy tosses, I'm throwing up the balloon, the punch ball, and the child is trying to whack it with the toy. So they're throwing the toy. And you start off easy. Obviously, you're standing close to the child and they're throwing their little stuffed toy. It's best if it's like the beanbag toys. We have Beanie Babies here, to try to hit that balloon, and you make it harder and harder by moving further away, and then having, throwing the balloon up in the air at different distances and a little bit more erratically, so the child can't predict where it's going. So we know that from a sensory perspective, from a self-regulation perspective, that whistles and blow toys are very essential. And just breathing is very essential. So whistles and blow toys, blowing feathers off the hand, cotton balls across the table, doing yoga style breathing, or I'll have children roar on the computer with me, and that creates a wonderful exhale. Anytime a person makes a sound as they're exhaling, you're getting a good exhale. And when you get a good exhale, you're automatically going to get a good inhale. And then one of the ones I love to do with kids is called Bubble Mountain. And I'll give them a bowl of water with toweling underneath it, and put in a little bit of dish liquid and give them a straw. Now, first, before I have them go into the liquid with the straw, I need to make sure that they can blow through the straw and not drink anything that comes in. The minute they have a straw, they're not going to automatically drink whatever the liquid is, because this is bubble water. So here's my little friend.
Nice blowing.
Right? Making this wonderful
wow,
bubble mountain.
It's gonna fall over. So big. You should grow too. I will. I'm taking a movie right now.
So one other thing before I go to that, one other thing, and I'm just going to reach here, is when kids are doing their Zoom sessions, we also want to meet their oral needs when they are doing their learning. So you want to have a glass of water available. You want to maybe add a straw, a thick liquid, like a yogurt drink, so that they get to get that input into their mouths. You also want to provide good hand tools that help them to meet those fidget needs, right? And get lots of good input, like using a squeeze ball. It strengthens the hands, but it also meets those needs. Using some therapy putty. It can be clay, but clay can be messy. So just this wonderful therapy putty. And what I teach kids is, no, you're not going to be doing this during your Zoom session with school. It needs to be out of the camera view. I don't want to make them self-conscious, but you would never know that I'm fidgeting with this clay right now. So you want to think about what sensory needs are really necessary to meet, and then come up with some tools to provide your child with the sensory input that they really do need. If you say hands on your lap, you know, or quiet hands for kids whose hands fidget, that doesn't, they may be able to comply and give you quiet hands, but then they may start bouncing. You know, a child can't have their entire body quiet. It's hard for us to keep our body quiet. And for a child with sensory needs, it is really virtually impossible. So you're going to find a lot more of these practical strategies in my books, but also go to my websites, because I've provided a lot of checklists for sensory issues, a lot of tips for how to deal with these things. I have a new set of tips for how to help your child to better tolerate a mask, wearing a face mask when the child is out and about. And if you're on Facebook, please join my Facebook pages, book pages, because I'm always posting things there. And I hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for all those wonderful ideas. For those who haven't actually, if at all you get a chance to go on Lindsay's website, there are various articles and various publications on almost every problem that you can possibly think of. She has articles on how to help with tactile defensiveness, on how to bring about prop activities, a lot of oral stimulation ideas. So do please check out her website, because you'll get wonderful, practical, very easy to apply solutions for all parents and educators there. So with that, we are going to move to our last panelist, our very own Kelly, who has been so kind to do this again for us. So Kelly is also on our advisory board at Gateway, and we have had such a wonderful journey learning from Kelly over all these years. She has worked very closely with Indira and many Gateway families. So a little bit about Kelly. So Kelly is a licensed clinical nutritionist that specializes in targeted nutrition therapy to address complex medical problems. Cure Your Child with Food, her award-winning book about the surprising ways nutrition impacts common childhood ailments, is published in 8 languages. Kelly lectures internationally and has been featured on numerous television programs and in periodicals including the CNN's American Morning, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the Opera magazine. She's one of course, the advisory board at the Gateway School of Mumbai, and she teaches at the Johns Hopkins University as an adjunct faculty member. So with that, Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen now also. All right. Okay. Let's see if I can get this going. Okay. I want to thank Fran Reinstein and Lindsay for all that wonderful information. And to Lindsay's point, I think we all need to, it's been an hour, guys, so let's all get some movement going here. So stretching ourselves out, maybe a couple of arm circles. Okay, pushing up, stretch. And if you need to, sometimes you can even just turn off the video. Well, we can't see most of you anyway, and just walk around the circle a few times just to break things up. And also, I want to show you, I do have, to both of your points, my blue light blocking glasses. I don't usually use them when I'm talking because they're so yellow, but they really do relax my eyes and make it easier. They're from Blue Tech, to be in front of the computer for a long time. So these ideas really work. Okay, so we all know that I'm not a doctor, so don't do anything before talking to your doctor about something. And I just want to review some of the things we talked about screen time, and then talk about some other ways that have not been covered. So we know that children's brains are more sensitive to electronic use, and that the screen blue light, like Dr. Reinstein talked about, it mimics daytime and suppresses melatonin. So melatonin is a chemical you make in your brain that tells you it's time to go to sleep. So that's, you don't want to suppress melatonin at night because you want to be able to sleep well. But of course, during the day, it kind of arouses you and wakes you up. This sounds good because you're learning in front of a computer, but it could unstabilize your chemicals so it's harder to sleep at night. So it might desynchronize your body clock. So you don't want too much of that blue light. It can also induce stress hormones. We don't think about that, but stress hormones are your fight and flight reaction. So you don't want to be inducing that because that can increase anxiety and also make kids moody and make behavior difficult. So we want to keep an eye on that. And 50 to 90% of people who work mainly in front of a computer, which is now going to be our children and of course our teachers, do develop some kind of eye symptoms that Dr. Reinstein was talking about. And so if you don't have them now, all this stress and being in front of the computer might help that to evolve. And so we want to keep an eye on that. And then it's also unnatural to sit in the same position and focus on a small screen for long periods. So that has been talked about a little bit by everybody. I would like to notice what some of the symptoms of our anxiety are so that we might know that some of the things in the behavior issues you're thinking, oh, our child doesn't feel like learning or they're misbehaving, but it could actually be signs of anxiety from the increased stresses of sitting in front of the computer all day long. So the moderate symptoms are fight and flight reactions like dry mouth, dry eyes, throat clearing, clearing, constipation, poor sleep. Some of that might be from all this blue light exposure, feeling cold or sweating, panic, digestive symptoms, and avoiding social situations. So these are signs that your child is really possibly experiencing a lot of anxiety. So we want to address some of that. Some of the milder signs can be muscle tension, like frequent sighing and breathing heavily, or fatigue, or backaches or headaches, or clenching their jaw a lot, grinding their teeth. So keep an eye on some of these symptoms and make sure that your child is not becoming too stressed out from being in front of the computer too much. One thing I heard that was quite disturbing, and I know the Gateway School will not ever be doing this, but in the United States, some schools are condensing their school time just to make it easier for teachers. So the children are literally sitting in front of the computer from 8 till 2 with only a small break for lunch. Normally, if you were in a high school, you'd have at least 3 to 5 minutes to walk between classes and chit chat with your friends, but now they're trying to get it all concentrated in one time. And that of course is very bad for development. And as been talked about by Lindsay, Dr. Reinstein, is really bad for your body and learning in general. So if you're under stress, what happens? One of the things that happens is that mild to moderate stress increases your appetite. So when you're under stress, you release something called stress hormones or cortisol hormones. And these hormones give you a sense, oh my goodness, something's bad's happening. A lion might be running after me, or somebody might try to rob my pocketbook or whatever it is, but you get a fight or flight response. Like, I need to get out of here. And that is because your stress hormones are going up. And when that happens in a mild to moderate way, 2 to 3 people overeat. That's right, and they're a little bit stressed. If they eat, it seems to calm down some of those stress hormones. Now, when you're under extreme stress, like if a lion really was running after you, you're not thinking about eating. Of course, at that point, you're thinking about getting rid of the food you might have eaten an hour before. But under mild to moderate stress, those hormones increase your appetite. And in the United States, unfortunately, 2 out of 3 people are overweight. And part of that might be because we do have this continuous level of chronic stress. And what do you want to eat when you have this chronic stress? When you are increasing your stress hormones, you want to eat sugar and starch. Those are the what we call the comfort foods, right? So when you're uncomfortable, you're stressed out, nobody's saying, give me the asparagus. You're saying, you know, where's the donuts? Where's the cookies? Where's the ice cream? You're looking, or even the chips, which are starchy. You're looking for things that have starch and sugar in them. And when they eat that, there's a temporary effect where it pushes down your stress hormones, which is fine if this happens occasionally. And that's the way it happens out in nature. Occasionally you'll be under stress, there'll be something terrible that happens, you can have something a little sweet, and that gets better. But if this is happening chronically, if you're under all day stress because you're in front of the computer, this can lead to nutritional issues. And of course, we've all heard about the COVID-19, meaning 19 pounds, and we don't want to be putting on that kind of weight because we're stuck at home. So people under stress crave starch and carbs. And like I said, increasing these temporarily will lower these stress hormones, which is okay for the short term, but is not a good long-term solution. You don't want to be using cookies to control your stress hormones for the most part. One of the things that starch and sugar does is it increases your serotonin levels. And serotonin goes down when stress hormones go up. And serotonin is a chemical in your brain that gives you a sense of well-being and calmness and happiness. Serotonin goes up when you fall in love. It goes up when you go outside in the sunshine, things you're not allowed to do right now. You're not allowed to go outside and run around. So it makes it difficult to get those serotonin levels up. Movement, mild movement increases serotonin levels. And so a lot of things we've used to control stress we don't have so readily available to us right now. And so a lot of people are using food. So what can we do to try to deal with this? How can we try to deal with the stress we're going to be under and support ourselves biologically so this is a little bit easier? And I have three basic things we can try. I mean, there's obviously many, many things that you could do, but I think we'll start with three things because we're all already overwhelmed as it is, right? So the first thing is we can look at protein at every meal, especially breakfast and lunch, because most kids are doing their schoolwork at 9 o'clock in the morning, not 9 o'clock at night. Yet we seem to eat as if we need most of our energy for 9 o'clock at night. When is our big meal? Dinner time, right? So that suggests that all of our energy is needed after dinner. At that point, we're trying to close up shop and get ready for bed or perhaps relax for the day. So we want to have protein for every meal. We want to increase DHA, which is a long chain fatty acid that's found in fish. And I'll talk more about that. And we want to look at vitamin M, which is movement, which Lindsay did a great job having some ideas for what to do to keep ourselves moving when we're all locked up. But let's start with protein with every meal. So if you want to do one thing that will help the most with learning during this lockdown, you can fix breakfast if it's not fixed already. And how do you fix breakfast? You look at breakfast like it's going to be supporting your learning for the day and not like it's just kind of getting you over a little hump and then you'll get to your good food later. So my ideas for fixing breakfast is number one, ditch cereal, frozen waffles, Pop-Tarts, bagels. Pop-Tarts are kind of a breakfast pastry, and all these kind of fast breakfast foods. Because when you get up in the morning, especially if you're facing a stressful day or a day perhaps you're not that excited about, you want waffles and pancakes and sugary things to kind of get you going. If you're an adult, you want coffee, maybe with some sugar in it. And that's great for an hour or two, but it's not good to get through the whole day. So look for more foods that are higher in protein, like eggs or smoothies. I don't know if you've heard about the paleo diet. It's a very popular diet right now in the United States. And the paleo is called the Paleolithic diet. It's basically a diet without any kind of flour or sugar in it. and or any kind of, really most of the grains are actually not in the paleo diet. And what they do is this is crazy because obviously Paleolithic man did not eat waffles, but they've come up with things like waffles and popular foods using non-grain alternatives. So Paleolithic waffles, if you Google paleo waffles or paleo pancakes, they're made with almond flour and like 3 or 4 eggs. So they're just loaded with protein. Sometimes they're made with coconut flour, which is less protein, but you can find recipes rather than just having, you know, sugar and flour and a couple of eggs. It's really a heavier kind of waffle. Leftover dinner. Dinner is the best breakfast. Why? Because really the way your digestive system is working is that you want to eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper, because that's the way your energy flow really is. So you want to eat breakfast like you're going to be going out and fighting the buffalo and doing all the work. And then by the time dinner comes along, what's happening biologically is your digestive system is starting to shut down. Your strongest digestion's in the morning. So if people have allergies, for example, or they're sensitive to things, they will probably do a little bit better eating some of that in the morning rather than eating it at night, because their enzymes run on a cycle. It's called a diurnal cycle, where they're naturally strongest in the morning. So whatever you eat in the morning kind of counts more. Salmon or fish, that's a wonderful Eastern breakfast. Or oatmeal. If you have oatmeal, maybe you want to add some nuts to it or some milk or something to increase the protein. And then if you want to do this really in more like India style, there's no reason why you can't do dal for breakfast. Dal is a wonderful breakfast. It will have lots of lasting power. Beans and pulses and legumes stabilize blood sugar better than any other food. And so they're a great thing to have for breakfast. If you say, well, they make me a little bit gassy, so perhaps we don't want to be sitting in front of the computer eating beans for breakfast. One of the things that can help with that is when you soak beans, and now lentils usually aren't soaked, but if you have trouble with lentils, you can soak them. You can soak them the night before in water with 1 tablespoon of vinegar, and this will help them be less gas forming. But especially, black beans and red beans and chickpeas, they will be better tolerated if you soak them with an extra tablespoon of vinegar added. And then there's black bean cheese quesadillas. 1 tortilla is about 19 grams. Look at all this protein. So you want to shoot for at least 10 grams, which is about 2 eggs if they're small, and maybe 12 grams if they're a little bit bigger. 10 grams, but 15 grams would be even better. And then if you really have to have a bowl of cereal, which is, I think, pretty much dessert food, but put that at dinner time or before bed if you absolutely have to have something like that. Also, beware of snacks. Snacks make up 25% of the diet now. And it's really easy because you're sitting in front of, remember the old information, you're not supposed to sit in front of the television and be eating because you're going to get heavy. Well, now we're in theory sitting in front of a television in terms of a screen all day long. So just beware that snacks can be a meal. So you want to treat them like a regular meal. So think about snacks as leftover what's for lunch or leftover what was for breakfast, rather than all the packaged foods that we usually think of as snacks. You want to minimize the sweets and the packaged foods and the cereals and the crackers. I call crackers crack because you can just kind of sit there and keep eating them and you never get full. So they're not really helping you to get nourished. They're just sort of being thrown in there for no particular good reason. So the first thing is, again, fixing breakfast and getting more protein with your meals, watching your snacks in between. And then the second idea is to look at the kind of fats you're taking in. And I want to particularly talk about a fat called DHA, because it affects visual processing so much, what Dr. Reinstein was talking about. Fats are structural nutrients. So that means they actually incorporate into your body the way you put a brick into a wall, or you're building something. And this is actually a structural depiction of what a membrane looks like. And you can see how the fats are incorporated just like structural components of the membrane. And two of the fats that are the most important for this are called EPA, it has a long name, that's why I call it EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and DHA, which is docosahexaenoic acid. And these are really long chain fatty acids. That's what they are. They're not essential fats. They are made from essential fats through a chemical process, but when they incorporate into the membranes, they literally change the way the membranes operate and the way they send information. And so it's like, I call this the three little pigs problem. Remember the story of the three little pigs, that house of sticks operates differently than a house of bricks? Well, a membrane in the brain made with DHA and EPA, which are the fats found in fish, operates differently than a membrane that is made from goldfish crackers or fried plantains or some other kind of food. They function completely differently. Now, how do we know this in people? We don't, because we're not going to crack open your brain and look. But they have done this, sadly, in animal studies where they literally have cracked open their brains, and they found after 3 to 4 months in rats, when they've been having fish oils added to their diet, their brains look completely different under the microscope. And they're actually sending information and processing information in a different way. Now, you could actually, or your child could have a symptom that they're actually deficient in essential fats that you need to make these longer chain fats. And so I want you to be aware that you might need them and they might be beneficial as an extra added nutrient, but you could actually have a deficiency symptom. And if that's the case, you absolutely want to fix this. And the most common deficiency symptom is never diagnosed properly, at least in my experience in medical field. And that is, it's these like fish skin, chickeny skin thing. It almost always starts at the back of your arm. And it looks like this. It looks like goosebumps that haven't gone away. They're not particularly itchy. You could have dry skin, so they could be itchy, but it's almost always diagnosed as keratosis pilaris, which is a condition with no known cause or cure. There's sometimes they recommend some kind of cream for it. That doesn't work because the problem is there's a structural problem with the membranes. You can see the structural problem. You're getting all these little lumps and bumps. And that's for not having enough of the right kind of fats to incorporate into your membranes. There's also coarse straw-like hair. Since I went through menopause, I call that menopause hair, but that won't happen to your children, hopefully. Excessive thirst or lack of thirst can be a sign of essential fatty acid deficiency. Wax buildup in the ears. I just got a patient who called me and said their doctors just don't know what to do. This child is pouring wax out of their ears, and that is a sign of essential fatty acid deficiency. In fact, when I was in college and we used to do experimental nutrition, I had the rats that were essentially fatty acid deficient. We would feed them a diet that didn't have enough of the right fats, and all of them had this crusty, waxy stuff coming out of their ears all the time. And that was from this deficiency. And then there's a rare symptom of toe wonking. You don't have to have all these symptoms, but if your child or you or anybody in your family has any of these symptoms, you may not be having enough of the right kind of fats in your diet. So the fish fats we're talking about are DHA, which is a 22 carbon fat, and EPA, which is 20 carbon fat. And because there's so many carbons in them, each of these little crooks here represent where a carbon would be chemically. These are what fats we're talking about, and they're found mainly in fish. If you're a vegetarian, DHA is also found in seaweed. And again, you can make this from the essential fats that are found in walnuts and other kind of foods. So what about the eyes? So why are we concentrating so much on these fish fats or seaweed fats? Well, we know that DHA may help dry eyes. And that can be a problem when you're in front of a computer a lot, that your eyes get dry. Sometimes it's because you're not blinking enough, and sometimes it can be for other reasons, but a DHA can help that. Dr. Reinstein talked a lot about possibly doing vision therapy if a child's having trouble tracking. And I have seen a lot of kids in vision therapy who are not doing well because they're low in this fatty acid and they're getting great therapy, but it's not progressing well. When we add DHA to their therapy, all of a sudden the vision therapy and the tracking seems to work better. DHA is a structural component. I mentioned the brain is a structural component also of the retina. And that's the layer of the tissue, the back of the eye that receives the pictures and is processed by the lens. And this is a major structural component of the retina. So that would be important. We know it's critical for infant vision development, and people with low levels of DHA and EPA are much more likely to have poor vision and eye diseases. It also improves the development of rod proprioception, and that's another structural component of the eye, and it decreases healing time following eye injuries. And so DHA is critically important for eye health. So you're thinking, well, how am I going to get that, especially if you don't eat fish? That could be a little tricky. Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to avoid fats that interfere with the good fats. And these are the fats that are found in shelf-stable foods or in packages. What does it mean to be shelf-stable? It means I can put that package on my shelf and it'll sit there for 6 months and I can pull it down and still eat the food. So in order for that to happen, the fats have to be stabilized. And when you stabilize the fats, you change the structure of them so they're not as good for brain and neurological health. So basically, if the bugs don't want to eat it for 6 months, you probably don't want to either. Bugs know what's good for them. Also, we found that fish oil may lessen the effects of junk food in the brain. So if you're finding you are eating too many of these snack foods and you are kind of giving into some of your lower sugar instincts like we're all doing under this kind of stress, they have found in a meta-analysis which looks at 100 studies, or lots of studies, in this case 185 studies. They look at all the studies they can find on a certain subject and they try to come to a joint conclusion about what they mean. And they found that taking fish oil to some extent reduced the effects of a bad diet. Now, of course, a good diet's even better, but if you're not perfect with your diet, this might give you a little bit of insurance for helping with it. We also know that DHA and balanced other fish oils do not work as well. They don't work quite as well for mood disorders, but they've looked at mood disorders and found that the right kind of fat balance can be very important for stabilizing mood also. They have looked more often at EPA, which is the other fish oil, for mood disorders like anxiety and depression disorders. And what's very exciting about that is they found that fish oil can work just as well as medication in many cases. So a good thing to know. So what are the best sources of fat in the diet? Well, if you want to get some basic fat in the diet, you know, the oils like sunflower oil, sesame oil, and peanut oils all have some of these fats in it. Now, some people are trying to stay away from the seed oils like the sunflower oil and are trying to concentrate more on things like olive oil and avocado oil as being better structural nutrients. And that is probably true to some extent, that some of these oils, especially like sunflower oil, if you heat them up, they become unstable and they're not quite as good. So in baked goods, we wouldn't want that. Perhaps in a salad, it wouldn't be so bad. But probably the best oils for using for cooking and for all kinds of other uses would be olive oil and avocado oil. And of course, fish are wonderful sources of DHA. We also know that fish oil supplements lowers inflammation responses, and I mentioned reduces anxiety. And these are just some studies that looked at that. And omega-3 supplements reduced the pro-inflammatory cytokines. These are messenger molecules. And these were in students in a double-blind study, which are hard to find when it comes to this kind of thing. Although none of the students had anxiety disorder, they all felt better, or at least 20% of them felt significantly better just taking some fish oil. So it can't hurt. So if you want to get a supplement and you're trying to figure out what's available locally to you, I want to give you a quick 2-minute course on how to read a fish oil supplement label. So a lot of the labels are a little bit deceptive. So you'll see this label said 1,000 milligrams of fish oil, but it was only providing 300 milligrams of the fish oil we're looking for, the active components, which would be EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and DHA. So this is only about a third active ingredient. Whereas this fish oil supplement you see has 800 milligrams of EPA and 600 milligrams, and they were advertising as 1500, which is much closer to what the active ingredients are. So sometimes they'll say contains 1,000 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids, which is another name for these EPA and DHA, but the active ingredients in this case, as you can see, this is an inexpensive one, were only 300 out of 1,000. So they advertised 1,000, they were giving 300. These guys advertised 1,500 and were giving 1,500. So make sure you read the side panel, not just what it says on the front of the label. I happened to look on Amazon.India, and these were some of the better fish oils I found there. They carry Carlson's and Nordic Natural and Nature's Answer, and you can, and these are all high quality products. I'm not recommending you take these, but if you're interested in them, talk to your physician or your healthcare practitioner and consider that this might be a useful addition to whatever you're doing to help with home learning. And then this is one of the ones I did not like on Amazon India, and I'll show you why. You can see it says 180 and 160, that's kind of a low dose, but look, this is per 1,000 milliliters. That's the whole bottle. So what they listed on the side, what was in the entire bottle, which would mean that if you took one serving, you might be getting 10 milligrams or 20 milligrams of the active ingredients. So this would be one of the less acceptable choices, or you're not getting much for your money. And then if you are vegetarian, you can get DHA for vegetarians. It comes from seaweed or algae. It's stronger tasting, believe it or not, than the fish one. So algae DHA is stronger. It's less concentrated, so it's more expensive if you want higher doses, so keep your eye on that. This is one I found on Amazon India, but there are more choices for those who can swallow capsules, but this was one of the liquid ones I was able to find. Okay, and then also virtual learning means more passive learning. So experimental learning involves movement and play and imagination, as Lindsay talked about, and children are getting more comfortable in their bodies. So my last thing always is vitamin M. And Lindsay gave you lots of great ideas about that, but I thought that I would throw in a couple of extra ones. We know that movement creates more complex neural networks, and it's important to move the whole body to broaden your eye focus. And we talked about breaking up the modules. So this is some of the things that I have used in talks and other places. Move and freeze. There are a whole bunch of videos there that are just 4 minutes. So they're great breaks in between learning. It's one of many singing and movement videos on the Learning Station, which is a big YouTube channel. And then there's also Getting Ready to Learn, our 20-minute yoga videos that were designed in New York, back to Dr. Reinstein and Lindsay's stomping grounds, by another OT named Ann Buckley-Ream, and they're ready to learn. At the beginning of the day, people do them yoga exercises to help. They're designed specifically for kids to help them with learning. And then there's also Dance Along with the Kids Bop videos, and those are also 4 minutes. So we have 2 4-minute videos that are fun, and then we have the 20-minute yoga at the beginning of the day, and that can all be done in a small apartment. And that's my book and my website and informational contact if you need me. And I think we're all ready for questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly, so much for that. Kelly, I have to say that every time we listen to your presentation, there's always something new that you leave us with, even though we've heard so many of your talks. And also it's almost like a brain exercise because I don't know if you all know, Kelly is a researcher herself. And everything that you see her presenting, it is really backed and grounded in research that Kelly herself engages in. So thank you so much for that. So with that, we have few questions that some of our participants have put down. So before that, there's one little comment actually by one of our students at Gateway, and this is for Dr. Reinstein, and I'd like to read it out. So one of our middle school students, his name is Nirvan, who's also actually a part of, he's been listening to this discussion. He has shared that he always keeps a clock next to him when using a laptop and that he takes frequent breaks from using his device. And he's happy to note that he's following Dr. Reinstein's advice. So he just wanted you to know that. Okay, so we have the first question is for Dr. Reinstein. So this is particularly for a child who's suffering from pediatric glaucoma, who is in a mainstream school right now. So this parent wants to know that, her child has requirements of larger fonts, brighter lighting, and slow pace of reading and writing in general. And she shares that their cognitive abilities are sort of at par as the peers in his class, but learning difficulties remain due to visual processing delays. So she has requested if you could guide or if you can share a little light on what they can do for this, for in terms of pediatric glaucoma.
Hi, well, that's a tough one because there's actually something physical going on with this child that's causing the decrease in vision. I don't know what the visual ability is with this child. I also don't know that super bright light is going to help. I think that that may create more glare for somebody with glaucoma than super bright light. I do have to say that it's a lot different now than it was 15 and 20 years ago, that iPads and tablets give a lot of help for kids with reduced vision that is secondary to a disease process going on. I do think that they have to depend more, just like a blind person would have to depend more on physically manifesting touch and their different senses. So for visual processing, they can use block, but they would have to kind of feel things. They would have to take, if you're going to do visual memory or you're going to do a memory game, they would have to kind of feel the sequence rather than just be able to see it and use sight. So I think they do have to use a lot more integrative skills, a little bit more metronome learning. So integrate metronome with auditory processing so that they can learn to integrate a little bit more. And again, it just depends on what the child's vision is. Are they able to see a computer? Are they able to learn on a computer? I do think that changing contrast, whether you change a screen aside from a white background with black print to a black background with white print may help also. But I don't think that the overhead lights being super bright is going to help that child, especially on a computer type screen. I think that that would increase glare. But the processing, it just depends. I do think that they need more auditory processing skills. They have to enhance the skills that they're not using as far as their vision.
Thank you, Dr. Reinstein. The next question is for Lindsay. So one of our participants has shared that my daughter cannot continuously use headphones. She complains of pain. Why would this happen and what can we do about this? Yeah, Dr. Lindsay, you'll have to, you are on mute, I think. You'll have to unmute yourself. That's why we're probably not able to hear you. Yes.
All right, here we go. Okay, good. Okay. Well, I'm sorry your daughter is experiencing that. And, one question that I have is it over the ear headphones or is it something that she's putting inside of her ear, the earbuds? There's a couple of different issues going on with headphones. First, let's assume they're the over-the-ear headphones, which do some compression into the head. For some people, they can't tolerate that experience. They can't tolerate the heat that builds up inside of the earpieces. The circumoral pieces, it becomes very hot. So it's a physical tactile discomfort issue. There's no air there. It also takes the sound and sticks it right into the ear and into the brain. For some people, that is overstimulating. When we are speaking to one another, or you're listening to this just over your computer speaker, the sound waves have a chance to travel and disperse somewhat. When we put it into the ear, there's no spatial distance that's happening. So it's overstimulating for a lot of people. So it's the tactile experience, it's the overstimulation in terms of the auditory system. And it's just hard because also if you have the earphones on, you're not moving at all, pretty much, unless you have an incredibly long cord. So in general, I mean, I know I said put on the headphones for remote learning, but it's going to be important to take a hearing break as well as a visual break. So get those headphones off. If the person cannot tolerate the headphones, they're going to have to listen for certain periods, at least, over the computer speaker. It's very, it's difficult because this is not a natural way for any of us to be learning or teaching. So we're following her lead, getting her to increase her tolerance. Also, I want you to think about the volume of the speaker. Is it too loud? When we have headphones on, we can have it at a much lower volume. So experiment with that. So there's a lot of different things to try. There are also different headphones that offer different sensory experiences. So there's a few variables at work here, and you're going to need to do your detective work, hopefully with an occupational therapist.
Thank you, Lindsay, for that. So the next question is for Kelly. So one of our participants has shared how animal protein is being seriously debated right now. And she is asking, what's your opinion on plant protein or any other alternatives? And in relation to that same question, someone has also asked that for DHA, are there any plant sources that they can look at?
Yes, well, it's funny because they finally did a study where they looked at whether this vegetarian versus meat question, and they found that you can have a healthy version of either diet. So it's not just whether it's vegetarian or whether it's meat, it's what you're really eating as a composition of that diet. And so I think when it comes to meat, you want to look at the quality of the meat. So meat is not just meat, it's just that meat. I mean, a hot dog made with all kinds of chemicals and who knows, duck lips and, who knows what else is in there can be one kind of meat protein. And then a meat that's raised as part of an integrated farming system where the animals are treated fairly and fed well would be a different quality meat. And there's no studies that looked at the quality of food in studies. They just looked at whether you have this food or that food. So I think you want to look at the quality of the food you're eating and then, eat the diet that suits your family the best. I think this vegetarian versus meat thing has to be put to rest. You can do it well. I've seen some of the worst diets I've seen are vegetarian diets because a junk food vegetarian diet can be very, very weak because some of the foods aren't as concentrated in nutrients. And then, of course, it's very easy to eat a junk food diet when you're eating meat too. So it's really the quality of the food. And as far as DHA goes, as I mentioned, there are algae sources of DHA because DHA is found in algae. Actually, the fish concentrate it, which is why when the fish eat algae in a normal environment, not farm-raised fish, but if fish are just caught like from a stream or something, they've concentrated the DHA that they've been eating in the algae. And so that's why the algae sources aren't as concentrated and why the fish sources are more concentrated. And the kind of ironic thing about everything is that it's safer to have fish oil than eat the fish because when they make the fish oil, they clean out all the toxins, the mercury and all the chemicals that are found in the water. They're all distilled out. Whereas when you're eating the fish, you're going to get everything that was in that river too.
Thank you, Kelly, for that. So our next question is for Dr. Fran. So one of our participants has written, my daughter doesn't have specs as of now. Is it advisable to give her anti-blue ray glasses?
So the blue light filters. She can get blue light filters without a prescription. That's not a problem to do that. It depends how old the child is, how much they're using a computer, how late they're using it at night. I find that sometimes people use the blue light filters as an easy out for taking rest breaks, for taking visual rest breaks. You know, like let's say I put on a pair of blue light filters and I don't have to do anything else. And that's the easiest thing to do. So I do think that some people have great reactions to blue light filters. They cut down on headaches, they cut down on eye strain. Some people don't notice as much of a difference with blue light filters, but even with blue light filters that I do recommend, I still think you need that to follow that 20-20-20 rule. I still think kids need visual rest breaks, they need body rest breaks, they need to follow their good nutrition. I don't think that it's a be all to end all and that they can push everything else aside.
Right. And just in relation to that, Dr. Fran, there is another question actually related to screen time is that, you know, we're in a situation where we cannot avoid screen time, right? Like kids that's their modality to learn. But is there any specific number, like how much screen time should be allowed for kids?
You know, it's hard now. You know, if a kid playing a video game is very, very different than a child on Zoom. I find that if a teacher is doing a really good job with Zoom learning, then the child is really projecting in space more so than they're just having words printed on the screen. You know, I'm hoping that it has more of a feeling of naturally being in the class with the Zoom learning than a video game or reading just text on a screen. I think if teachers give these kids just text on screens, it's very, 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 very different. I don't want to say anything now because that's all these kids are doing, right? They're on their Zoom learning. I do definitely think that they need to take breaks in between lessons, in between lesson plans. As you're moving from learning math to learning science, they need to get up and they need to move. And I think that the teachers also need to be well aware of that and take these breaks for the kids. So not only the visual breaks, but the other breaks. Now, I also think it's super important that after they're done with school, that the first thing they should not do is turn on their Xbox or turn on the television or sit on YouTube and look at videos. I do think that they need a good hour or two after school is over to take these sensory breaks, to exercise, to move around, to play with toys, to maybe do a puzzle, to just take a visual break before they start using the computer, and to really limit during the week when they're on classes to, you know, an hour or so on another type of device. And that's also age, you know, the younger the kid, the less time they should be on a device.
Thank you, Dr. Fran. The next question is for Kelly, and actually we have a lot more questions coming on now. So I want to let the audience know that in the interest of time, we will try and take as many questions as we can. Okay, so this one is very specific. It says, and please excuse me for my pronunciation. It says, can we use spirulina or moringa supplements for kids to have omega and other minerals?
Yes, it's spirulina and moringa could be used for minerals, but they're not particularly great sources of DHA, depending on where they come from. There will be some DHA, but I think that that is not sufficient if you're, for most cases. Again, talk to your healthcare professional, but I think that the fish oil or the algae-based supplements are probably better sources.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. The next one is again for Dr. Fran. So she's one of our Gateway parents, and she's written, my son, who is on the autism spectrum, has been complaining of visual sensory overload and gets overstimulated when people blink. So even something as subtle as blinking is brought to this child's attention, and he's finding it very hard to ignore that input. Or when he's looking at people's faces, he tries to block faces with his hands and complains that he can't focus on what's going on. Is there any therapy that we could help him with?
That's interesting, because I think that kids on the autism spectrum do not like eye contact in the first place. So I think the blinking thing is so difficult for this child because they are not comfortable with eye contact in the first place. So, and now people may be blinking more just to do the computer use. And if this child is sitting and watching 10 kids on a screen and they're all blinking, I would say that that would be a little bit disturbing or distracting. I do find that if I tell children to look at something else on a face, that it makes them more comfortable. So if I tell children, okay, you need to make eye contact because that's what they're teaching you, because it's better to make eye contact when you're talking with somebody. I tell them to look at a person's nose or at their cheek. So it looks like they're making eye contact, but they're really not making eye contact. You know, the other thing to do is to take, again, some visual rest breaks and have the child look away a little bit and then look back, to try and work with his occupational therapist on some behavior modification as far as the blinking. Maybe some pictures or some videos to just kind of acclimate the child into the blinking. But if he's not really looking at the eyes, it may help with that a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Fran.
Can I add something
yes.
to that? Can I add something? Because from a nutritional perspective in autism, there's also a second factor, which is that there's been found to be something called a G protein problem in kids with autism. So they prefer to look out of the side of their eyes rather than directly. And it could be a sign of vitamin A deficiency.
Okay, so this is great. We've got the visual perspective. We've got the nutrition perspective. Lindsay, would you like to add anything from the sensory perspective also?
Okay, this is such an interesting question because a lot of our kids with visual processing, sensory processing, information processing problems do have these difficulties that seem rather odd to us. They don't make any sense to us. There was a 2013 study done that shows that kids with autism can detect movement twice as quickly as a neurotypically developing child. So there's a lot of movement that they're trying to process. Blinking is this very subtle movement for a visually sensitive, hypersensitive child. And what happens when they're trying to process other sensory inputs, particularly the auditory, is they begin to engage in mono-channel processing. So in order to hear better, they need to turn off their vision. So that's where, from my perspective, I see a lot of the avoidance of eye contact, because the movement of the face when anybody is speaking, it's not just the eyes blinking, is overstimulating. It makes it very difficult to process auditory and visual input. So looking at a different part of the face is a great first step, looking at the nutritional piece. From an OT standpoint, I would begin to look at and intervene with the auditory processing problems and the person's ability to integrate what they see with what they hear. This is part of what's breaking down here. So it's a multifactorial issue and treatment here.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think Anaita was the one who asked that question, and thanks for asking that question, because it kind of reinforced the fact that when we look at a child's behavior, there are so many angles to it. There were all three pieces here, so thank you for asking that question. The next one is actually in relation to the same thing, and it's for Dr. Fran. So one of our parents wants to know that, is autism one of the only conditions where you would see children difficulty with eye contact, or would you have you in your practice seen otherwise also children who struggle with that?
Autism is definitely not the only reason why children have difficulty with eye contact. All of the other visual issues that I was talking about could create difficulty with eye contact. If a child is incredibly farsighted and it's hard for them to focus on somebody's face, they can have difficulty with eye contact. If a child has a lot of astigmatism, if a child has focusing issues, if a child sees double, they're not going to want to look at your face up close. There's no way that that's going to happen. They're going to turn away. They just can't tolerate it. So there are definitely different visual issues why a child would have difficulty with eye contact. When I was examining a child a bunch of years ago, he was actually diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and he had an MRI, a CAT scan, tons of different testing, and nobody ever checked this child's vision. And I gave him an eye exam, and he was incredibly farsighted, but he was also super smart. So he was hardly reading at all. He was in 4th grade, hardly reading at all, no eye contact at all, very, very shy, wouldn't look at anybody or anything. And all he needed was a pair of glasses. And it completely corrected all of that within a few months. And now he's at an Ivy League college. So it definitely, and he's not on the spectrum. So really, if somebody is having issues with eye contact, an eye exam is very, very important.
Okay. The next question is for Kelly. So the question is that, do we need anything more to the diet other than DHA or fish oil of an 11-year-old child with OCD symptoms and frequent complaints of dry skin? He's also a picky eater and has a sweet tooth.
That's a lot to deal with. Yeah, there's obviously talk to a healthcare professional that can really individualize a program for you. But when you have a picky eater, there could be any number of nutritional deficiencies and problems. And OCD and picky eating is particularly tricky because, of course, you're stuck with, in some ways, like a sensory way where the food has to look a certain way or be a certain way. So I suggest you get some professional input for that. I mean, the fish oil would be great for the dry skin, or even walnuts and some other essential fats. But of course, if he's picky, that might not be possible. So I suggest you find someone to help you out with that.
Okay, Kelly, there's one more for you. It says, I wanted to know how estrogen harms our children. Basically, how healthy is tofu and soya for vegan?
Well, I think that the tofu question, boy, soy has been one of the most controversial foods, I think, in nutrition. And the problem really is it soy or is it some of the other things about soy? And we don't really know. 96% of soy in the United States, and I think it's mostly pretty high around the world, is genetically modified now. So that means it's being not only having a genetic modification organism, but very often it's being treated with Roundup or one of the other kind of herbicides. And so you have these residues of other foods in there. And when soy started becoming genetically modified, peanut allergies started going up because, we've all noticed that peanut allergies are going up. Well, soy and peanuts are in the same family. They're both legumes. And so the question is genetically modified soy increasing peanut allergies? And that's been, nobody knows the answer to that. So I think what I would do is I would definitely incorporate some tofu into a vegan diet, but I would make sure it's organic or try to get organic when possible. I think that that's the best solution for that. And not go too crazy, especially with boys, because we know that soy has a component, it has a chemical called genistein in it, which makes estrogen behave better. It has an estrogenic effect. So for young boys, that's not such a big deal, but as they get to be towards puberty, you don't want to be just piling the soy on.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. So we have the last few minutes actually left for our panel discussion. So, and we still have more questions coming in, but of course we can't, like, we have to like stop somewhere. So what I'll do is I'll pose one last question to each of the panelists, and then we have a note of the questions that may have not been answered, and we'll see how we can get to that at a later time. So the next one is for Lindsay. So one of our participants, she has shared that my daughter loves to read. After a long Zoom call session, is it okay for them to read for long periods of time, often till bedtime? Lindsay, could you unmute yourself?
All right, there we go. I'm sorry. So Dr. Reinstein referred to this before. After a day of Zoom, you need to refocus the eyes. You need to refocus the brain and the body. Reading is, to me, one of the greatest pleasures in the world. And I love it that, you know, your child is escaping into a different life and into a different universe, depending on what she's reading. So it's really wonderful. But to spend all day on Zoom and then to spend the rest of the day into the evening reading, she's not giving her visual system or her body a break. So I think, again, she should take a break, a movement break every hour or so. Just even to get up and walk around the table, walk around the house or the apartment. I mean, I've had kids run around their chairs 10 times before they sit down again. I think this would be helpful for her. She can maintain some different body positions while she's reading. She could be standing up and reading at a tabletop. Just move the body, get the body moving, and take those 20-20-20 breaks every 20 minutes to look away into the distance, at least 20 feet for 20 seconds. So make sure she takes the break. And I love it. I love to hear about kids reading like that. Just keep it healthy.
Thank you, Lindsay. So this question, the next one is for Kelly. So one of the participants has written that my child, because of a lot of anxiety during COVID, has lost appetite. He is diagnosed with ADHD and visual processing difficulty. What can I do to increase his appetite, as he refuses to eat and is extremely anxious?
That's a tough one. You know, they've been looking at this anxiety problem with COVID, and one of the things they noticed is that people don't like ambiguity. They can modulate risk, but this sitting at home while other people make decisions about your life makes people crazy and anxious. So that is, I think, it's difficult for all of us. I think you want to give him some providence over his life by giving him choices, not over everything, but, you know, set up a structure where, okay, we have to have breakfast before school starts. Do you want to have this or that? And give them a couple of choices so that he has some ability to control. Because one of the theories about anxiety is this lack of control. And they've also noticed in children in particular, in this generation, there's really a lack of any kind of control over their life. And we watch them everywhere. When I was a kid, which was a long time ago, my mother said, "See you later," you know, in the morning. And we would, you know, be back by dinner time and we would roam around. But, you know, kids can't do that anymore. They have no control over their life. So they want control of something, and gosh darn it, you can't make them eat. So we find so many anxiety issues and control issues play out in food now, because it's one of the few things they can do. They can shut their mouth. You make them go to school, you make them sit in front of the computer, you lock them up for COVID right now. So what do they have control over? So you want to give them some kind of control over what they could do. And then the other thing you can look at is not zinc would help, because when kids are very picky eaters, they become zinc deficient very often. And the zinc deficiency, food doesn't taste that great. It tastes kind of and it smells kind of And so they like a lot of sugary and salty things because of altered taste. And of course, one of the symptoms of COVID now is loss of taste and smell. And we know that that can be related to zinc deficiency. So when I hear that in somebody with COVID, I think, I wonder if they have enough zinc. That went kind of down the tube so quickly. So you can look at zinc and talk to your healthcare person about that.
Okay, Kelly, there's one more, and I'm sorry I said one last, but there's one more for you. Somebody wants to know, what is the right kind of DHA product?
Oh, sure.
Well, I've tried to give you some examples, and I think, will these PowerPoints be online for them?
We can share them with them. Yes.
Kelly, it will be available on our on the recording of the seminar. So everything that you shared with us, they can always just go back and watch it on the recording.
I wonder if it might be worth taking out a couple of the slides. Like Lindsay had some great slides about activities they could do, and YouTube links, and I had some YouTube links maybe, and I had the pictures of some of the fish oil. Maybe some of those slides could be taken out because they were hard to grab during the presentation, and that might help.
We can also link the presentation. If you have an open link, then we can put it in our YouTube description, and it will be available for all of our participants to look at after.
Thank you. Actually, Kelly's presentation had a lot of resources, sources for DHA. So I think that would have been answered with that. Thank you.
Yeah, you can put the slide up, the one from India, Amazon India. I put out the best ones, yeah, I could find.
And with this, we have one last question for... I have lots of questions. I'm thinking which one to ask. Okay, so we have this one question for Dr. Fran. One of them has written, my daughter frequently rotates her eyes. So she's wondering, is that something that indicates something? And if yes, then what can she do to fix it?
Frequently rotates her eyes is a little bit confusing. Is she kind of rolling them around? Is she moving them back and forth? Is it something she can control? I would say that child does need a good eye exam. It could be a vision issue that requires glasses. It could be that her eyes are super dry from using a computer screen all day. It could be a deficiency in something nutritional. It could be a sensory type of thing. So I would say that a child who's kind of moving their eyes around a lot does need a good eye exam. She could literally have an eyelash that's scraping her eyes if she's doing it and it's a sudden onset type of thing. So it depends what kind of rotating her eyes we're talking about, but I would definitely say a good thorough eye exam would be the thing to do there.
Thank you, Dr. Fran. So with that, we're at the end of our panel discussion. It's been a long 2 hours, but I honestly felt like the time just flew because the session was so engaging and so enriching. Thank you for all the wonderful sharings that you all have shared with us today. What I'd like you to do is, so everybody, thank you, Chandu. So if you have any more specific queries for children, we know we are able to answer a lot of generalized questions, but specific queries sometimes needs a consultation. So you can get in touch with Kelly, Dr. Fran, Lindsay, and you can consult with them privately. We've shared with you their email IDs, so you can make a note of that. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us on this panel discussion. Indira wants to say something. Can someone unmute Indira? Indira, do you want to share something? Chandu, could you allow,
Yes, Indira should be able to share. Sorry, 1 second, we'll just check. Everyone should be able to share.
Indira, try unmuting yourself.
Yeah, I just did. I just wanted to thank you, lovely ladies. Thank you so much. And can you all just stay back for a few minutes while the rest leave? Hi, Josie. Hi, Jeannie. Y'all can wait too.
Chandu, you'll stop the YouTube live?
Yes, stopping. Give me a sec.